The Necrons, an alien race ancient beyond imagination, are awakening from their 60 million year dormancy to plague the living once more. The mystery of the Necrons. Some secrets are best left undiscovered. The galaxy remains a better place for them being undisturbed. Within the mile-long logic stacks of the Librarian Omnissiah on Mars and the archived catacombs on the Adeptus of Terra are 1,000 such enigmas. Many are critically linked to the history and the power structure of the Imperium, and the possession of such knowledge is accompanied by an automatic death sentence. Others are less obvious, dangerous nuggets generally overlooked in the morass of information packed in the data archives by thousands of years of imperial bureaucracy. For example, there is mankind's belief that Eldar and the Orcs represents the oldest alien races in the galaxy. And yes, these races have been amongst the stars for millions of years, long before humanity emerged as a dominant species on its own home world. However, the truth is that other, infinitely older and more malevolent races have long stalked between the stars even then. The Orcs do not recall such things. Their viewpoint is firmly rooted in the present, and they have no care of the past. The Eldar know, though, and they remember. Long ago their very existence became so blighted by the knowledge that they hid within the legend and banished the truth to the Black Library, a secret repository of their most dreadful secrets which exist outside space and time. Another example is the report of hundreds of tomb wells discovered by the exploitations of Adeptus Mechanicus over the millennia. Most lie at the far edges of the galaxy, dead worlds where ranks of ancient structures bear testimony to eons past glories of dead races. These towering edifices of brooding stone were raised with technologies undreamed of by the Adeptus of Mars, and have always excited their interest. Their endless investigations have discovered little and cost many lives, though the High Marge insists that the survey teams continue to be dispatched and reports made. Some whisper that these worlds are far from dead, that their ageless inhabitants are only sleeping away endless millennia in a hidden stasis chamber, waiting for signs to stir once more. If the Adeptus Mechanicus could complete their translations of arcane hieroglyphy within the unbreachable tombs, they would know a little more. They could find passages indicating that these places were built by the Necrontyr, a benign race whose cold existence achieved great miracles at a time before Earth even bore life. If they could read the script, they might learn that it was the Necrontyr who found and worshipped the immortal Catan, and so gained eternal life for themselves. The true horror of the times when the Catan ruled the galaxy can only be understood by those with access to the Black Library of the Eldar, and they will not speak of it. Last of all, there is the machine guard of the Adeptus Mechanicus themselves. In Imperial theology, the Holy Spirit of the Omnissiah worshipped by the tech priests of Mars is a facet of the immortal God Emperor of mankind. Their dogma is as categoric on the matter as it is filled with praise for the holy nature of the machine. However, the most ancient and zealously guarded record of their order tell of a time before the coming of the Emperor, when the far older power was paid homage on Mars. They make veiled references to unspeakable knowledge won in the golden age of technology, and how it brought about mankind's eventual downfall of the age of strife. That such abject heresy can exist at the very heart of the Imperium is dreadful enough, but the implications of it, should it ever be proven true, are unimaginable. The beginning of time. It is said that the birth of the star gods took place during the creation of the universe itself, formed of energies unleashed in the churning mass of unimaginable force. In this ancarnic interweaving, the sea of the stars began to swirl and eddy into existence, and for an age the universe was nothing more than hot gas and dust, ruled over by the incomprehensible forces of billions of young stars. Long before planets had formed and cooled, the first self-aware entities emerged from the seas of plasma and mountainous flares of the suns themselves. In later eras, these creatures would become known as the Catan, but at this stage in their existence they bore little resemblance to the terrifying entities they would later become. They suckled at the monstrous parasites upon the uncaring parents that bore them, shortening the lives of the suns by uncounted millennia. In time, these star vampires learned to fly on wings of magnetic flux, leaving their birthplaces to drift to new feeding grounds and begin the cycle anew. They paid no little heed to the hunks of solid matter which they passed in the void, the internal fires and the pulsing electromagnetism of these new-born planets insufficient to even register on their monstrous hunger. The rise of the Old Ones. Just as the stars gave birth to the creatures fitting to their ilk, so the planets eventually gave rise to life which began the long climb to sentience. First to cross the sea of the stars was a race of beings called the Old Ones. They possessed a slow, cold-blooded wisdom, and raising astrology and astronomy to an arcane science. Their understanding of the slow dance of the universe allowed them to manipulate alternative dimensions, and they undertook great works of psychic engineering. Their science allowed them to cross the vast gulfs of space with a step, and they spread their spawn to many places. The Old Ones understood that all life is useful. Where they passed, they kindled new species and impregnated thousands upon thousands of worlds to make them their own. The Necrontyr. As the Old Ones spread across the galaxy, younger, fiercer races struggled in their wake. The Necrontyr was such a race born under a fearsome, scourging star, which uncaringly drove their evolution forth with atomic winds and plasma storms. What little information is known of the Necrontyr tells that their lives were short and uncertain, their bodies blighted and consumed by the searing caress of their cruel star. They were mercurial, morbid folk, their precarious lifespans riven from the cradle to the grave with constant loss. The Necrontyr sought control of their destiny through science, but learned that they could not conquer the curse that had been encoded into their bodies. They persevered, yet still their accomplishments gained them naught. Their star still reigned over them as life-giver and death-guard combined. Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, the living becoming temporary residents hurrying through the vast tombs of their ancestors. Unable to find peace on their own world, the Necrontyr blindly groped outwards to other stars. Using stasis crypts and slow-burning torch ships clad in living metal to resist the age-long journeys through the void, they began to colonize distant planets. Sometime into their slow expansion, the Necrontyr encountered the Old Ones. The colonization of these ultra-intelligent mystics had been immeasurably swifter than that of the Necrontyr. That, and their immense longevity, nigh immortality, kindled a burning hatred in the Necrontyr, which ate at them spiritually as much as their hideous cancer consumed them physically. Why should one race be granted such long lives, whilst their own were cut so cruelly short? Jealousy begets hatred, and the Necrontyr turned their entire civilization towards destroying the Old Ones and their spawn. The War in Heaven. The terrible wars which followed the Necrontyr's hate towards the Old Ones would fill a library in their own right. But the Necrontyr could never win. Their superior technology was consistently outmaneuvered by the Old Ones, thanks to the mastery of the webway portals. The Necrontyr were pushed back until they became little more than an irritation to the Old Ones, a quiescent peril clinging to the outer dark among the halo stars, exiled and forgotten. The Necrontyr's fury was cooled by long millennia of imprisonment, turning instead to their utter hatred of all life and an implacable determination to avenge themselves upon their invincible foes. Since the earliest times, the Necrontyr had studied the suns to try and understand their baleful energies. After long, bitter centuries of searching for some power to unleash upon the Old Ones, the Necrontyr perceived anomalies in the oldest dying stars. In the complex sins of energy, the Necrontyr found a sentience more ancient than any corporal life form in creation. Beings of pure energy that had spawned in the birth of the stars themselves. These entities had little conception of the universe when the Necrontyr first found them, feeding upon the solar flares of magnetic storms of the bloated red giants. Here was the weapon the Necrontyr had sought, the children of the stars themselves, progeny of their death guard to cast down the Old Ones. The power of these creatures was awesome, the raw energy of stars made animate, and the Necrontyr called them the Catan, or Star Guards in their tongue. The entities were dispersed across areas larger than planets, their consciousness too vast to comprehend, and how the Necrontyr were able to communicate with them is a mystery. Understanding that such diffuse minds could never perceive the material world without manifesting themselves, the Necrontyr forged bodies for them to occupy. Cast from the living metal of their ships, fragmentary legends tell of translucent streamers of forge shifting across space as the star vampires coiled into the realm of matter across an incorporeal starlight bridge. The Catan incarnate. Incomprehensible forces were compressed into the living metal of the false bodies which the Necrontyr had forged as the full power of the Catan found form. As the Catan became even more manifest with the focusing of their consciousness, they began to appreciate the subtleties and the pleasures of both matter and life. The close weaves of dancing particles enthralled them, and the deliciously focused trickles of electromagnetism leaked by the mortal bodies of the Necrontyr about them awoke a hunger in the Catan quite unlike the one they had sated among the raging torrents of the stars. The Necrontyr fell into awe of their discovery, and the Catan quickly took control. The powers of the Catan were indeed those of gods, and it was not long before the Catan became truly worshipped as such. Perhaps they were tainted by the material well they had entered, or perhaps their manifestations were true to the sun-bound existence they had enjoyed before, but they were as cruel and capricious as the stars that bore them. They revelled in the adulation and Epicurean delights of uncounted mortal slaves. The fall of the Necrontyr. Armed with weapons of godlike power and ships that could cross the galaxy in the blink of an eye, the Necrontyr stood ready to begin their war anew. But the Catan had another boon to grant their subjects. They offered the Necrontyr a path to immortality and stability their race had always craved. Their cursed flesh would be replaced with living metal in imitation of their gods. Their disregarded husks would be consumed, and their cold metal forms would be free to pursue their vengeance against the Old Ones and an uncaring universe, freed forever of the weaknesses of their mortified flesh. Whether the Necrontyr truly realised the price they would pay for accepting this pact with the Catan will never be known, but their race was utterly purged, becoming instead the Necrons, and cursing themselves to eternal servitude of their star-born gods. The Catan feasted upon their entire race, leaving behind only ghostly echoes of the Necrontyr. Only a few of the very strongest retained their intellect, and even they were shadows of their former selves. The Necrons cared not. They would live forever as their guards had promised. Only one thing truly remained of their race, a burning hatred of the living. Legions of the undying metal warriors set forth in their tomb ships, and the galaxy burned. The Old Ones' mastery of the warp was now countered by the C'tan's utter supremacy in the material universe, and the enemies of the Necrons suffered greatly in the slaughter which followed. Necron ascendancy. The C'tan now dominated the galaxy. The last bastions of the Old Ones were besieged, and the races they had nurtured become cattle for the obscene hunger of the C'tan. The young races, the Necrons and their guards, were cruel masters, callously harvesting their populations at will, figures of terror who demanded their adoration and fear in equal magnitude. For reasons that will probably never be known, the C'tan began to battle amongst themselves for sport and spite as they unleashed destructive forces beyond comprehension. Planets were razed, suns extinguished, and whole systems devoured by the black holes. New cities were built by the toil of millions and then smashed down again. As the harvests grew thin, C'tans eventually devoured C'tan, until only a few were left, and they sported amongst themselves for an age. Eventually, even the Old Ones, legendary for their patience and implacability, became desperate. They manipulated life into new forms with an ever stronger link to the warp, desiring minions with the capability of channeling psychic power to defend themselves. They nurtured many potential warrior races, and there is speculation that these include the earliest Eldar, the Rashan, the Khanib, and many others. Millennia passed as their creations bore fruit, and the C'tan extinguished yet more life from the galaxy. The Old Ones strike back. The hot-blooded young races spread across the galaxy, battling Necron science with warp-spawned magics. The C'tan's empire of destruction was sent reeling. The forces of the Imperium were anathema to them and to all the hellish destruction they unleashed. They could not stay the Old Ones' relentless advance. The C'tan, unified for the first time in millions of years, turned to finding a way of quelling the soul-fueled energies of the young races. They instigated a great warding, a plan to forever defeat the magic of the Old Ones by sealing off the material universe from the Imperium. With their god-like power, it was only a matter of time until they succeeded, and the greatest work of the C'tan was begun. But before this was complete, the seeds of destruction the Old Ones had planted millennia before brought about an unforeseen cataclysm. The growing pains of the young races threw the untapped energies of the warp into disorder. War, pain, and the destruction were mirrored in the bottomless depths of the Sea of Souls. The maelstroms of spirits unleashed in the carnage coalesced into the previously formless energies of the warp. Older warp entities became terrifying predators, rending at the souls of vulnerable psychers as their environment was torn asunder and reforged by the energies called forth for warring in the material universe. The apocalypse looms. The denizens of the warp clustered ferociously at the cracks between dimensions, seeking ways into the material world. The Old Ones brought forth newer creations to defend their last strongholds, like the hardy green-skinned Krork and the technology-mimicking Jakiro, but it was already too late. the Old Ones' intergalactic network was breached and lost to them, their greatest works and places of power overrun by the horrors their own creations had unleashed. Most proficient of these horrors were the enslavers, beings whose abilities to dominate the young races and create their own portals with transmuted psykers brought them forth in even greater number. For the Old Ones, this was the final disaster as the enslavers took control of their minions. The Pandora's box unleashed by the young races finally scattered the last of the Old Ones and broke their power forever. Life had stood at the edge of the precipice during the war between the Old Ones and the Catan. Now, as the enslavers breached the immaterium in epic proportions, the survivors looked doomed. The Catan entombed. The Necrons had been vindicated in their pursuit of cold science, and had the undoubted pleasure of seeing the Old One civilization collapse. Unfortunately, it appeared that the last of their masters' cattle would be lost with it. The Catan, however, had a solution in keeping with their measureless perception of time. They would allow the enslavers to take what was left and let the galaxy become a wasteland. The psyker swarm would die away, and in time the galaxy would throw up new life for the Catan to consume. It may take millions of years, but the most important thing was to ensure they would be there to see it. The Catan chose to escape the great catastrophe that they could sense coming by descending into Necron stasis tombs, which would be sealed for millions of years. Their machine slaves and Necron warriors would guard them while they slept on worlds purged of all life to keep the enslavers from their door. Only when they were disturbed by a sentient race with the correct characteristics to be mastered and consumed would the star vampires emerge. Just 2 of the Catans have emerged from their tomb worlds to plague the galaxy thus far. They have found a new and unexpected age of civilization and war. The galaxy is blossoming with life, but still overrun with latent psykers and worshippers of the infernal warp engines unleashed by the war with the Old Ones. It will take time and many great machinations for the Catan to regain their rightful place as rulers of the galaxy. The agents of chaos must be overthrown, the Eldar eliminated, the great work completed, and humanity subjugated before the harvest can truly begin anew. But the Catan and the Necron slaves are ageless, their science still unparalleled, and time is on their side.